Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 3, Episode 6. I'm Mike LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
Steve, great to be back on the microphone. We've got a great episode today focusing on department stores because you work for a department store, I work for a department store, and we brought some experts to talk about, and we had a great wide-ranging conversation. We have Simeon Siegel from BMO, Bank of Montreal, based out of New York, top retail analyst, and Ethan Chernovsky from Placer.ai. And they've got, just such great data on who's going where. I wish they had it in Canada. We're a bit envious, but it's wonderful information to check out. Someday we will get AI here. Actually, we're pretty good at AI, but not that one. So listen, you started your career-ish, department stores from Sears, and they've really changed and morphed. And I guess the center of the discussion, and we'll get to the discussion with our guest in a bit, is really what is a department store? What's its function? What does it do in the modern world?
Yeah.
How is it connected to an ecosystem? So it's a really great discussion. But let's jump right into the news of the past week. And to our listeners now, we're now going weekly. We were doing bi-weekly over the summer. We're now going weekly this is our first post-Labor Day episode. So let's talk about IPOs. Last episode, we were talking about the one IPO, and let's now talk about the Allbirds IPO. What were your thoughts around their documentation?
Well, it's a real rush to get a lot of these e-commerce dominant companies into the public markets. Whether that'll turn out to be a bubble or not, I guess remains to be seen. But Allbirds kind of in the same vein as Warby Parker, not around quite as much, but a brand that's really focused on a narrow set of products, originally launched online only, has been getting into stores just really over the last couple of years. I think they're up to about 20 stores. But just like Warby Parker, business looks smaller than I think a lot of folks thought. It's a couple $100 million US, losing money. I think about a negative 15% operating margin, something like that. Again, like we talked about Warby Parker, doesn't mean they can't build this into a much more successful company. But I think Allbirds a little bit more challenging. It's kind of a niche product. I've got my one pair of Allbirds, which I hardly ever wear, sample of one. But
so what do you think of them? I've tried them on, but I've never actually bought a pair and worn them. They're light,
very light, very comfortable. They've expanded their product line a bit over the last couple of years. So, and big part of what they sell is the sustainability of their products. So, which is very much on trend. But for them to get the kind of valuation that's been talked about, which I think is north of $2 billion, they've already raised a couple $100 million. Right. They got a lot of work to do to make this more than a niche apparel brand. They're talking about getting into athleisure, which is certainly a hot category, but pretty big leap.
Them and everybody else
doing right, and plenty of competition. They're talking also about opening a couple hundred stores, and that seems also very aggressive to me. If we kind of back into the numbers, it looks like the stores they've got so far are maybe doing $1 million a piece in some really expensive real estate. So I don't know. I'm interesting brand, very much a niche brand. I think they got a long way to go to really prove themselves to be a successful brand on any scale.
Yeah, I mean, call it one to watch, right? A pure play going physical. I like their setups when they did shop and shop in Nordstrom's. Actually, they had some Nordstrom's. They had a standalone shop in Toronto. I visited their shop in Soho in New York. Really nice, but
very well done.
Unlike Warby Parker, very well done, right? I mean, very on brand. Kudos to them. Unlike Warby Parker, where I think there's opportunity to consolidate that kind of category of the eyeglass market. I don't see opportunities to do anything like that. I don't see a consolidation. Like, how do they get that kind of growth? Is it point of presence, shop and shops? They got a long road to go, but of course, you can at least walk it in their light shoes. So we wish them the best. So I also saw in the news stores not dead. Who is it? Ace Hardware opening up like 170 stores, right? And there is What's going on here? They're not dead, Steve?
I mean, no one's more surprised than me that physical retail isn't dead. But yeah, I mean, I really haven't. I used to pay a lot more attention to the hardware and home improvement business because I worked in that business many years ago. And hardware stores, not so much because of the retail apocalypse narrative, but more because of the growth of Home Depot, Lowe's, and a lot of the big box Kingfisher in outside the U.S. And that was really thought to be kind of the death of neighborhood hardware stores. But I guess with the growth of all the home categories and perhaps Home Depot and Lowe's creating some space for getting a little bit closer to the customer with the neighborhood stores, Ace Hardware going to open 170 new stores. So yeah, we just we
great. I
keep
mean,
seeing all these announcements about store openings from digitally native brands, old timers like Ace. Just saw the CoreSite research that said that store openings are predicted to be up 60% year over year. So yeah, I guess physical retail not dead.
So interesting. And Ace is in Canada with PV under a PV brand name. They're Ace, but the great operator, another great regional player. So they fit in nicely around the big box. I come from the Black & Decker world. I was Black & Decker Canada for a while, and you really realize that there's a place and a time for the big boxes, but there's a place and a time for your little local neighborhood stores that carries just what you happen to need, and you don't have to wander for a long time.
Right.
Pros and cons. Both categories are growing. So I was looking at some results. There's a company in the doghouse, Chewy. Their results, not so great. I mean, what happened to the pandemic puppy? Did that just run out of kibble or something? What's going on?
It's hard to be too disappointed about 27% sales growth. But yeah, here's a company that is essentially online only. So leaning into all the shift to e-commerce and in a category that has just been exploding. So their sales results were pretty good, though apparently a bit disappointing to Wall Street. But here's another company that in kind of a perfect storm really can't turn a profit. If you back out their shareholder compensation bit, they basically broke even. And with a 27% sales increase, they improved their EBITDA margin by 20 basis points, which is pretty poor flow through to the bottom line. So yeah, very interesting, but still a company that gets a lot of attention. It's got a massive valuation. But I think some of these mostly online only companies are at some point going to have to demonstrate that they can actually make a decent amount of money with all the capital they put into the business. But whether this will turn out to be the dot-com bust, or next year maybe the dot-com bust, the return of the dot-com bust, I guess we could say, or not, remains to be seen. But
2.0.
I would really
dot-com bust 2.0.
Yeah, I would really think that with some of the factors that have really created kind of this perfect storm, we'd see better performance.
Well, I guess the good news for Chewy as a category is the pandemic puppy thing is real, and it also basically builds an annuity for 5, 7, 8, 10 years for those kind of like ourselves. We got our dog Ziggy before the pandemic, but if all goes well, he's going to be around a bunch of years, right? So now we're it's not just a one-time purchase thing for sure, right? There's all kinds of things that go along with it, and it's theirs to capture, right? It again, a competitive market though. You got big box folks sell kibble by the ton. It's lots of tailwind, but you got to be careful the tail doesn't wag the dog when it comes to.
Do you go to clubs to workshop this material before we get on mic, or because the pun game is strong?
No, actually, I do it. I practice it on, and if you're wondering, for those who can see me, who are watching us on YouTube, why I'm wearing a barbecue apron, because I've just launched my new barbecue show, Last Request Barbecue. Check it out on YouTube. Lots of fun, and that's where I kind of take my dad jokes to the literally the next level. So be warned in advance. All right, last thing, and we always seem to talk about Amazon because they're always doing something interesting, but Amazon has joined with Walmart. They're staffing up huge. Now, that's not unusual. What did they announce? 50,000. They're going to hire 50,000 people. Yeah. Not unusual given their scale and scope and turnover. Remember, we talked to Brad Stone about how they actually like some turnover, particularly at the frontline warehouse. But when you peel it back, it looked like this wasn't just about frontline in the warehouse staff. What were your thoughts on that?
Walmart's announcements seem to be much more about staffing up for fulfillment for the holidays, whereas Amazon's announcements seem to be much more about tech workers, headquarters staff, those sort of people. So hard to get my head around 55,000 SG&A types that aren't in the fulfillment
Incredible.
arena. But I think it's just speaks to their growth. It speaks to what appears to be pretty strong consumer demand, and of course just the diversity of things that Amazon's in. Again, because we talk retail most of the time, the thought process is, oh, this is all to support their e-commerce growth, but it's advertising, it's the studio business, it's Amazon Web Services,
AWL, and
right. So there's a lot. Things. There's a lot there.
Well, it kind of reminded me, and I was re-listening to the great interview we did with Brad, and if anyone's listening hadn't listened to that, because he actually was thinking about in his first book, do I even call them a retailer anymore? Right. And we had that discussion. I mean, who knows? Maybe 25,000 of these folks are going to space and working with Blue Origin. I mean, it's a very broad, who knows, right? I mean, maybe they're starting an outpost on the moon, for goodness sakes. I don't know where they're going to put them all.
So they're going to send the returns.
Yeah, I guess. All right. Well, listen, great introduction. We got a great episode coming up all about department stores. Wanted to remind everyone who's listening on the podcast that we have a YouTube channel with some extended content on there. So be sure and check that out. That is usually posted a day or two after our episode, but always be sure and check that out because it's a lot of fun. You get to see Steve and I in our in our morning discussion here, which is always a pile of fun.
And the great void behind me.
And you're it is a little Spartan. It's true. A little Spartan back there.
Minimalist.
One book, the most important book. Minimalist. There you go. It's minimalist.
As long as I
mine's maximalist.
Drop my shoulder to get the book in the shot.
Oh yeah.
I don't get nasty grants from
mine's
my publisher.
There, yeah. It's the minimalist versus the maximalist, and onto the Greek alphabet we go. So listen, without further ado, let's jump right into our interview with Simeon and Ethan.